Do you ever wonder how great leaders in the community make things happen? When they encounter new, unexpected challenges like a pandemic, how do they continue to successfully make an impact? Welcome to That Sounds Terrific, the podcast that connects you with these amazing people. Get insights on what they do to meet their goals, find out how you can help them in their mission, and learn their methods so you can be more successful at what you do. Welcome to That Sounds Terrific with host Nick Koziol.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of That Sounds Terrific. I am excited to have Jeff Sera from Food for Thought joining me today. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Thanks for having me, Nick. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, this is like our, second or third conversation, and I knew that I wanted to have you on the show, because for a lot of different reasons, but you're a great connector, and we had some great conversation, and I know my audience is going to want to hear what you have to say. So why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, so I am a self-development sensei and a Reiki practitioner, and I support people with going on a healing journey. So taking a look introspectively to see, are you carrying any self-limiting beliefs? Are you self-sabotaging? And then doing the work to really build and develop, self-confidence, self-worth, self-respect, and supporting that process and that journey with the energetic side with Reiki. A lot of times, some clients come to me and they have a physical issue. I've pain in my shoulder or my hips or my back. Can you help me with a little bit of Reiki? And I found that, yeah, I can, but it's instant gratification. It's temporary relief if they're not addressing the root cause of the problem, which a lot of the times, if there's not a direct injury correlated to it, where it's, I bumped my shoulder or I flipped or fell or something like that, then it's tied usually to emotions or energy being stored. And so doing the work internally to support them with actually healing the root cause of the problem and not just giving them temporary relief.
Mhm. That's awesome. That's awesome. So how long have you been, in this business?
So I launched the business in 2021. That's when I really started to kind of develop the framework for everything that I was doing. And then actually in March of 2023 is when I started to train in the art of Reiki with my master. And it's been interesting because that ended up being something that has kind of always been intuitively there or kind of in the, I guess, in the background of the subconscious of my mind. But as I've been training in it, I've learned that it's always been something present in my life. So it's been pretty cool to connect to that and consciously.
Very cool, very cool. And I know Ricky, it's like usually traditionally, in person, but I think you have some like online, like offerings too when it comes to that, right? Or my,
So it's interesting. Yeah. Reiki is a modality that can be performed at a distance, and it's all energy. And the example I like to give is our minds comprehend, the physical very well, but sometimes with energetics, it's a little bit more out there, so it's harder to comprehend. So, we can have a conversation virtually, but if I throw my pen at the camera, it's not going to hit you, right? It's not going to
Mhm.
transfer the same way. But if I were to sit here and be really, really angry and upset at you, you would feel that on the other side. And
Mhm.
so that is an example of the energy. And so with Reiki, a lot of Reiki is through intention. And so setting the intention and consciously saying, okay, I'm going to support this person with their own healing, and I'm just going to transfer them more energy to support with what their body's doing. Um, it allows the energy to flow through the intention, and energy can transcend both time and space. So we're able to perform distance Reiki. We're able to perform past and future Reiki. So there could be times when it's like, oh, I have an event coming up and I know I'm going to have a booth there. Let me send that space Reiki for when I'm there with the booth.
Mhm.
Or, oh, that was a really hard time in the past that I went through. Let me send myself a little bit of past Reiki. Things of that nature where I'm very analytical left brain. So it's like, that doesn't always make sense. But
Mhm.
also, I've created enough results at this point where it's like I can't deny it.
Mhm.
There's an effect that it has. And the distance is something that my personal preference is to perform Reiki in person because I get instant feedback. I can sense and feel, and I'm highly empathetic, but that empathy really works best in person in close proximity to an individual. So when I am performing distance Reiki, I know that it's working. I know it's having an effect, but I don't feel it as strongly as when I'm in person.
Mhm. No, it's interesting because like I'm not a Reiki expert by any means, but when you had first told me that, I'm like, oh, that's super interesting. I didn't even know that was sort of possible. And, I love the explanation that you gave that, energy can be transferred, and the example, like, right, that you feel things like, if you get mad at me, you start yelling at me, I am going to feel something from that. So that's super interesting. Um, so how do you like, what's your process when you get a new client, right? You get someone coming in, like what would someone coming to you expect? I mean, you can start with the in person for sure, but yeah, let them know about some of the distance
Yeah, so
stuff
there's
too.
kind of two angles or approaches that I take when people approach me. They approach me typically for one or the other, where they're coming to me for their self-development. And as we're working together, all of my one-on-one sessions are an hour and a half. So the first hour is discussion and talking about, what's top of mind. The last half hour is set aside for meditation. So I'll send my client a recording or something for them to listen to as they're meditating. And while they're meditating, I'll send them distance Reiki. So it's primarily self-development with a little bit of Reiki infused. And then the other side is when clients come to me specifically just for Reiki. And we'll go through the Reiki process, typically an hour session. And at the end of it, I'll share with them the things that I sensed or felt or that came up. And through that conversation, we end up talking about the self-development side. So then it's primarily Reiki with a little bit of self-development involved in that. Um, so it depends on the intention in the first place why someone approaches me. It could be, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs that are dealing with the mindset of starting their business. There's a lot of failure and rejection that goes with that. There's a lot of pivoting and constantly shifting. There's a lot of responsibility and imposter syndrome that they have to work through. And so, it could be supporting them with that to develop a healthy, positive relationship in their mind with the business that they're creating. I also work with people who are struggling with very negative self-talk. Their internal dialogue is very self-deprecating. They may be in self-beat up all the time. They're struggling to celebrate. And then a third kind of area that I tend to find people come to me for is when they're struggling with their cultural identity. So growing up, I'm Japanese American and I grew up in California. And so there was a combination of always feeling a little bit out of place where in the US, being an outcast because I'm Asian American, I'm not like everybody else around me. And then going back to Japan, it's like, oh, but I'm American, so I don't quite fit in there. And so there's always been this kind of like, well, then who am I? And finding a way to really be authentic. It took me about 30 years to get there because I was always trying to fit into some other place that didn't always align to who I was. And so supporting other people with really looking inward to find, their answers rather than what they've been surrounded by. We grow up in society where it's like, fit in or don't be the nail that stands out. And so doing the work to really tap into what is it that I want? Who is it that I want to be? Not what I've been told my whole life and what I think is the right thing to do or say or be. Um, so on the self-development side, those are typically the things that people come to me for. On
Hmm.
the Reiki side, physical pain, stress, anxiety, um, stuck emotions. That's always a big one where, it's like, oh, I really feel this thing and I don't know how to release it. And sometimes the Reiki comes and supports with moving that along. Stuck energy or stuck chakra points. Sometimes we get, blockages internally. And so the Reiki energy supports with that, creating that flow again. So those are typically the things that I see most commonly.
Hmm. And how do people kind of identify that they need help from someone like you? Like, what are the typical trigger points, I guess? Because it may seem sort of obvious, hey, I need help, but like, how do they know to come to, like, Jeff is the person to come to?
Typically, I cross paths with them somewhere, somehow, whether it's in person, whether it's in virtual space, whether it's a one-on-one conversation. But it's usually an energetic thing. They just feel like, oh, I really enjoy being in your space and your energy, and I want to talk to you more about these things. Or they feel safe and comfortable with kind of opening up. So the origin of my business name, Food for Thought, came from something that I was just doing with friends and family where, we'd go and hang out and we typically eat. And during that meal, I would find that people are always opening up to me. They're always just sharing things or they're venting or things come up. I was like, okay, there's a correlation here. This wasn't what I was doing for work before, but it was something that I did enjoy doing and that I did quite often. And so I realized that having a meal, it gets us kind of in a calmer state. Our nervous system relaxes and we're not in fight or flight. We're not in fear of anything. It's like, okay, we're safe, we're eating. and then they lower their guard, and then they're able to be more vulnerable and share the things that the subconscious mind is really wanting to say. And through that, I found, again, it's just this feeling that people have of feeling safe, or that they can share with me, or that I may have some insight for them that would support. And so typically it starts with that, where it's like,
Mhm.
okay, because anybody could use that type of support, myself included. And what I found is, there's a lot of different people out there, a lot of different mentors, coaches, people that can support, but it ends up being the person that you resonate with, the person that you feel a connection to. There's a level of chemistry.
Mhm.
And so it's really that for other people. When they feel that connection, when they feel like, oh, this is a place that I can do this work and I can actually grow and learn here, that's typically the starting point.
Okay, cool. So is there any kind of like niche area that you seem to gravitate towards, or people from a certain profession that gravitate towards you? Just curious if you like see a lot more people in one area than others.
Yeah, so those 3 points I talked about earlier are kind
Mm,
of a similar path that I've walked. So I find that there's um, a level of relatability, where I come from the corporate world. I spent about 8 years in web security, and I live in Silicon Valley. So a lot of people in tech space working corporate jobs deal with a lot of stress and pressure from their jobs. And so I also hold a Monday evening meditation group, and the people that are members of that space are, coming for a way to kind of start their week off. It's the first Monday, or it's the first day of the week, and they're like, okay, let me settle back in. The weekend just ended, and let me de-stress a little. And so people in the corporate space, also entrepreneurs, and then people with the negative self-talk, or those with the cultural aspect. And those kind of go hand in hand, where the negative talk and the cultural aspect tend to come from their parents. Our inner dialogue and our inner voice is typically a reflection or a mirror of how our parents spoke to us, or one of them.
mm,
Um, and with the cultural aspect, especially for Asian Americans, it can be very self-deprecating. It can be very focusing on what was lacking, not celebrating what went well.
mhm. That's super interesting. No, I kind of figured that's something along the lines of what you would say. I just want to make sure I'm asking these questions for the audience too, that they can kind of understand how you can help them, and maybe even identify people that can send your way, right? So, um, something along that same line, like I guess like you kind of talked about how long your sessions last, like hour and a half, and like, but also what about the length of time? And this is probably subjective too, but like the length of time that someone might stick around with you. Is it kind of an indefinite thing, or do you have like a typical time period that people come and kind of meet with you?
It depends on the intention. So I have some clients where the two containers that I create are, I have a 3 month option
Hmm.
and I have a 1 year option. And then people that I've worked with before, at least for the 3 months, I give the option for them to go just month to month.
Hmm.
So I have some people that they'll work with me for the 3 months, and at the end of it, we talk about what their goal is and their intention and what they want to get at the end of that period of time, because that's about roughly 12 sessions, or that's exactly 12 sessions.
Hmm.
And at the end of it, what is the result that they want to have? What does that look like? What does that feel like? And who's the person that's going to be walking out of that?
Hmm.
And sometimes when we get to that point at the 12th session, they're like, yeah, thank you. This has been exactly what I needed, and that's enough. And some people are like, okay, that was amazing. I want to continue on and keep going. Um, and so typically the time frame is at a minimum 3 months, and then it carries on. So one of my clients she's been with me since, I started the business. So it's been a good amount of time, and it's more of an ongoing continuous conversation where she realizes, she's worked through certain things, but we end up circling back. It's like, okay, we raised the bar with self-confidence, and now we're at this new threshold, and we work through some other stuff over here, but then it's like, oh, the self-confidence thing's coming up again. Time to do more work and level that up again. And so it's a continuous ongoing process for her. And it really just depends on the journey that people are on and where they're at today and what they feel like they need in that moment.
Hmm. Cool. Um, is there Can you give us maybe an example of something that was successful that you were really proud of that came out of your, experience here?
For myself, or
I mean, it could be for yourself too, but like, for a client, or, or for yourself, like why do you do this kind of work? I mean, like, I would just love to, pick your brain about that.
Yeah, well, growing up and going to school, I graduated with a bachelor's in criminal justice. And throughout my entire time going to any type of academic schooling, the skill sets around self-confidence, self-worth, self-respect, self-love, self-care, though there weren't any classes on that. That was not something I was taught in school as part of any curriculum. It was something I had to really learn through going through various trainings, having different mentors, different experiences, different courses, and putting it all together because it was very fragmented. And so realizing, oh, this is extremely powerful and probably the most valuable thing that I've ever learned that supported me in life in any sense,
Mhm.
not just one specialized focused area. This was like something I could apply to any area of anything I'm doing, and realizing that it wasn't really widespread, even though it seems very obvious, it seems very simple, like, yeah, you should love yourself, but how do I do that was
Mhm.
kind of the missing pieces. And so realizing that there was this gap, and for a little bit being kind of bitter, like, okay, why was it so difficult for me to learn this? But realizing that I could be part of the solution. And so creating, the business around that being the goal, to support others with learning these things that took me, a really long time to put together from my own experience and my own self-development, to create a way for people to not have to reinvent the wheel. Like, this is not something that they have to go and do on their own the way that I did, and go through the ups and downs of struggling with that and trying to understand it and piece it together, and just spending a lot of time in the head,
Mhm.
where I can support people. It's like, okay, what's your question? Here's a solution and an answer, or something to reflect on that'll support you with coming to your own answer and conclusion, because that's another part of it where what worked for me may not work for others. And so putting down kind of um the ego in it to be like, oh, I know best and I know what's right. It's like, yeah, I know that for me, but I don't know that for everyone else. But I can create the way that I thought about these things to come to my own conclusion, to support others with finding theirs.
Mhm.
Um, so it's been interesting to do that. And it's so rewarding for me to watch those light bulb moments go off for people, where it's like, oh, I just answered my own question.
Mhm.
And it was, it almost, when I do my job well, it's like I didn't do anything, right? One or two
Mhm.
questions, and this person has this light bulb moment for themselves to be like, oh, like I knew that. I just didn't know it consciously. It was in my subconscious. So
Mhm.
bringing that to the surface and having them become aware of it, and then implementing that in their life, and hearing in the following week how it changed things, or how it supported them, or how they've had growth in that, is always the rewarding aspect for me, that it makes it, I love what I do.
Mhm. That's awesome. Like the self-discovery moments, like, I've coached in the past with students and things like that, and having that light bulb go is the reward, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that is so awesome to be able to experience that. And then, so you were kind of having these moments, and you're sort of self-discovering even with your clients, I'm sure, right? There's moments that
Oh,
you're having.
it's amazing. It's such
Yeah.
a mirror, right? The things my clients are working through, it's like, oh, that parallels something I'm working on or thinking about. And it becomes, um, it solidifies the thoughts for me. So an example is like, when you're learning something, the best way to really know and test that you've learned it and take it on as your own information is like to be able to teach somebody else the same thing.
Mhm.
And so as I'm going through that, there's this back and forth of like, okay, yeah, I need to be practicing what I preach, right? Like, I'm constantly
Mhm.
having to reevaluate and be like, okay, am I doing the thing that I just told this person to do? Am I doing that inner work? And sometimes there's insight to be like, oh, I just supported them with unlocking and understanding that, and that's also relevant to me. So then there's this internal level up as well that is concurrent with them, even though it may be, again, there's different kind of elevations of the various mm, developmental areas, right? So self-confidence, there can be, someone starting out, someone's very advanced, wherever it is, there's always this kind of stair stepping that happens. And so for me, it's this continuous elevation of, anytime I support someone with their elevation, it pushes me up a little bit too. And
Mhm.
so it's amazing to witness that. And it's also something I've come to like understand, that it's a never ending journey. There's not like an end destination I'm trying to reach to be like, oh, at some point I'll be perfect. It's like, no,
Mhm.
you're just constantly looking for that balance. And each step brings you closer to just being in more self-control and self-mastery. Life will not get easier, but how I choose to manage and deal with the things that do happen will be a little bit better each time.
I love that mindset, and like having instructors or teachers that are of that way, in that adage as well, just because, like, you get that in coaching, and you're learning too, but like also the teachers that are also in it to learn, right? From their students, that they don't know everything, right? So, but I think that's a super cool experience when it comes to like coaching, to be able, first of all, to identify that, um, you know, the best coaches are just like you, like where you're saying, I don't know everything, right? But I'm going to put you in a space to help you kind of figure it out on your own. Teach the man to fish kind of mentality, right? Not this is how you like, here's your fish.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. So, you know, there's there's so many different, styles, of coaching, and I like the food for thought mentality. Do you tie that in to like your, meetings now? Are there opportunities like, to have food for thought with Jeff?
Absolutely. So any of my clients that are local to my area, or if I am traveling near any of my clients, then that is always an option to hold our session over a meal.
Mm,
What I ask for though is that they pick where we eat and they also cover the tab.
mhm,
So whatever their comfort level is, whatever their preference is, and I'm a huge foodie, so I can always make recommendations, but the exchange there is, the food for thought.
mhm. I get it. That's awesome. I love that. Um, So what's kind of next for you, Jeff? I know you've got, you're pretty well established now, right? But what's the future? Where do you want to take this? How far do you want to go?
So the Reiki side of my business is relatively new, where it's only been about a year that I've been practicing and integrating it. But it's something that initially on my website, it was like, okay, I'm primarily doing self-development. And then if you look around enough and dig, you can find a little bit of Reiki. So I've been bringing that up to be very parallel, where it's like, these are the two primary things I do. And there's
Hmm.
a variety of ways to interact with me in that space. And so I've recently just put up kind of two new offerings where previously I had an 8-hour VIP day, but the name of that didn't really correlate to what it was. Essentially, it's an 8-hour deep dive into your own self-development and healing. And I also now have a 3-hour option for strictly it's pretty much a 3-hour Reiki session, but there's a little bit more involvement where there's a somatic release where the client will go through kind of an emotional detox, releasing anything they've been holding on to and wanting to get rid of, and um, kind of make space for anything else that they want to actually bring in. And so we do, I call it R3. So a release, a refill, and then a reevaluation. And again, that entire process is supported with the energetics of Reiki. And that is an intensive healing day. And so these are new offerings that I'm presenting for my clients and for people that may not want to step into the full weekly interactions, but they're like, I need to, let's do this in one weekend, right? Like, let's do
Mm,
this in a single day. I just want to, understand these things very specifically, work through it, or whatever it may be. And that may lead to them wanting to work longer term one-on-one, or it may be enough.
mhm.
And so that's kind of the new area, as well as this year, I am hosting a trip to Japan in June. And that is going to be the first of an annual trip that the intention is to bring students of Reiki to Japan to connect to the origin of where it really comes from. And there's a specific location called Mount Kuruma that is going to be the focus of that trip. It'll be really a 5-day trip with the option to extend it to a vacation, where I'll also be kind of like a tour guide through Japan.
Wow.
Um, and so this first year, I have my Reiki master and 5 of her students, and then a Reiki master in Japan and 5 of her students. And we're going to meet in Kyoto, where we'll be doing a collaborative kind of cultural exchange where we both get to share kind of how Reiki is being practiced in our countries, and any knowledge or information that can be shared or transferred to both sides, as well as opportunities to learn and ask questions. Um, and again, this first group is a closed group just of the 2 masters and their students, where we're kind of trying it out, seeing how we can smooth out the process so that
Hmm.
next year we can open this up to a wider audience of people, more people, and really create kind of more awareness and education around what Reiki is and how it can support people.
I love that. I love that. As a higher ed professional, one of those big study abroad fans, I think that that's a great experience. We are always looking for ways for our students to kind of go across the country and connect with other faculty and other teachers, and I love
Mm.
that you're testing out the. This is just so academic for me. I got I got super excited about this just because it's exactly what I love to see in higher education, but on this level, Reiki, and then going to the root of Reiki, but two different masters. That's going to be cool to be a fly on the wall on your trip.
Yeah,
But
I'm excited.
yeah, I mean, definitely keep me appraised of kind of what's going on in the future with that. Because I'm sure there's a few audience members that be super interested. Are you thinking that it's going to be, your students again, like future connections that way that will go, or is it going to be more open for the
It
future?
will be open. The requirement we have, so we have the 10 students, 5 on each side, and then I have a
Hmm.
staff of 6. Everybody involved in this trip is trained in Reiki to some degree, whether it's
Hmm.
level 1 or they're a master level. And we have it's so cool because we've been kind of gaining support through the things that we're going to need on this trip. So we have a team that's supporting us with creating t-shirts for the trip.
Hmm.
The artist that did the calligraphy for the Reiki kanjis, it just so happened that she's trained in Reiki. The other guy that's actually going to be doing the screen printing of the shirts was curious enough about it that he trained with the master in Japan. So he is now trained in Reiki.
Hmm.
Um, we have a tour guide that's going to guide us through the mountain that we connected with. At the end of the conversation, I was like, by the way, are you familiar with Reiki? He's like, I'm a Reiki master. And so it's been
Nice.
like, okay, cool. Everybody that's involved in this is Reiki trained and familiar with the energy. So that'll be the requirement for anybody that joins us on this trip is they are either trained or master level, whatever it may be, or going through training actively.
Hmm.
Um, in August of this year, I'll also begin starting to take my own students to teach them Reiki.
Hmm.
And that'll be a new elevation for me, which I'm developing the course kind of curriculum and how that's going to look moving forward. But yeah, in the future, it will be open to pretty much anybody that is wanting to join us. We may cap the number of people, but it
Hmm.
won't just be limited to the students of the 2 masters. Right now, we wanted it that way because we're familiar with them, where it's like, hey, we're going to probably have some hiccups along the way. We're really figuring this out and moving through what does and doesn't work with a smaller group. And so they're understanding that going in. But moving forward, then the intention is to make it an annual trip that happens around the same time every year, and growing it slowly each time, where we're smoothing it over. And it's very much like everything else I do. It's like you never know how it's going to go. You just have to do it. And then through the experience of it is how you're going to gain the knowledge and understanding of what to shift and change.
Yeah. No, I think it's a really cool idea. I love that you kind of have pretty much all of your bases like loaded up and ready to go here when it comes to like you have some short sessions, you have some longer sessions, you have a weekend retreat, and then a trip. It's just like you got all your offerings coming together, and I think that that's great.
Yeah, it hasn't been easy. It's been through, several years of kind of planting a lot of seeds. This trip this year we've been planning for just over a year now.
Mhm.
The idea came to us, yeah, in a trip I took in March last year. It was actually my Reiki master channeled that, she's psychic. So she was like, yeah, this is something that you and I are going to collaborate on and do. I don't know exactly what it'll look like or what it'll be, but we're going to create something together. And it ended up transpiring into what it is today. It's like, yeah, this is a full blown retreat now. We're doing it.
That's awesome. Sounds absolutely terrific. Um, so kind of along the same lines, like, just to ask, like, who do you think is a good candidate to kind of get pulled into learning about Reiki and becoming, familiar with that or training in that? Is there a specific type of person that you do you think should go for that or
It's um it's amazing because Reiki can be performed by anyone and everyone. There's not like a skill set required or prerequisite. It's you have to go through an activation, but it's not like a limitation to be like, oh, only,
Mhm.
this type of person or this type of personality or whatever it is. Um, and it's really about the intention a person may have. Is it they're just curious about the energy work, or they want to actually take the course, learn about it so they can perform it on themselves, or they want to share that with friends and family, or they want to integrate it into whatever their business is today. So, Reiki it's a transfer of energy and it can be applied to anything and everything. So I'll Reiki my food and my water. I'll
Mhm.
Reiki objects or things that I carry with me. I'll Reiki people, I'll Reiki buildings, I'll Reiki my house. I create a protective barrier. So it's really the imagination, and the intention is really the limitation to it. And so depending on what a person wants to do with that energy, the possibilities are limitless. And so it's really, if you have an interest, if you're curious about it, then starting the conversation. And Reiki is not the only modality that exists. So as I stepped into this space and became more involved in the community, and started to do like fairs and things where I would have a booth and I'd be performing Reiki on people, I met a lot of other healers in a lot of different modalities. And so it's cool to kind of have this variety of tools available. And it's like, which one calls to you, right? What do you feel like you want to use, or what do you know would be supportive for the thing in front of you? And so sometimes when I'm working with someone, it's like, oh, this person has energetic cords attached to them. I could do some work with Reiki on that, but that's not the most effective tool to remove those cords. So I'll call on a friend or a colleague to be like, hey, I need some help with this client. Can you do some work to cut the cords for them so that then I can come in and refill them with Reiki? And so in that way, it's a lot of collaboration, a lot of community building, and this understanding of the variety of different tools that are available. And so, having a person be educated in what options exist so that they can choose what they feel most called to. I think a lot of times, we have intuition, but sometimes we learn to shut that down, where it's like, I'm tired, but I'm not going to listen to that. I'm going to drink some caffeine. Or I'm hungry, but I don't have time, so let me just put that off, right? We learn to kind of shut down what our needs are, what our body's telling us, where intuitively it may be like, I'm sitting here and it's like listening to this. It's like, oh, I want to learn more about Reiki, or he said something about cutting cords. I want to learn more about that, right? So intuitively, someone may just feel called to it, and then exploring that. It's really up to the individual. They're in the time and the place. They're ready and willing. But I don't have the answer for others. It's really just, if you're interested, reach out.
Awesome. Well, we're going to have all the ways to reach out to Jeff in the show notes, your website, contact information, and everything. But Jeff, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you definitely want to get out there to the audience? The big stumper question.
My favorite quote that has been with me since the beginning of my journey is, where the mind goes, energy flows. And so when we're putting our mind into, the positives and the silver lining to something, we're going to see more of that. We're going to see more of the opportunities. If we're focused on the negative, then we're going to see more of that as well. And so what is it that you want to create, and put your focus into that? That would be kind of the main takeaway I would have for others. And then also I have a Monday night meditation group that meets at 7 p.m. Pacific time. And I am starting a second group for the East Coast. So it'll be 2:30 p.m. Fridays Eastern. And so that's a really good space to connect with me and be involved in, the variety of different communities. So the main group is comprised of entrepreneurs, healers, and those in self-development. So it's a really cool mix of people, and it's been fun to watch them interact with one another. Because for me, it's, 3 compartmentalized different groups that there's now a lot of overlap.
Yeah, that's awesome and terrific. And so while you're healing, you're networking and learning about other different connections that you could have. I love it, Jeff. So thanks for being on the show. And I hope that my audience will take the time to reach out and connect with you, and we will stay connected as well. So thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nick. It's been terrific to be here.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of That Sounds Terrific. Don't forget to check out the show notes and our website at thatsoundsterrific.com to find the contact information and the best ways to volunteer with the organizations that we feature. If you know someone that is doing terrific things and think they should be featured in a future episode, be sure to email us their name, contact info, and short description of what they're doing at thatsoundsterrific@gmail.com. If you like our show, give us a 5-star rating and give us some social media love by liking our Facebook page, That Sounds Terrific. Follow us on Twitter at Sounds Terrific too, and Instagram at Sounds Terrific. We love hearing your feedback on how to make our show sound even more terrific. Till next time.